Welcome back to AM Northwest. Our next guest has dedicated her medical career to saving the lives of women, and her new book takes that one step further. We welcome the author of All in Her Head, medical oncologist Elizabeth Comen. Doctor, great to meet you. Thank you for writing this book. Why was it important for you to do this?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. No, there are so many reasons why this was important to me. I have taken care of women my entire professional career. As you said, I'm a medical oncologist specializing in breast cancer, and I've been privy to countless horrific stories, tragic stories, heartbreaking stories of women being dismissed, misled, their conditions misunderstood or mistreated or misdiagnosed. And, you know, I'm a woman, I've been a patient myself, and I know that walking through our healthcare system is not only imperfect, but at times deeply dismissive.
Yeah.
And wanted to improve that narrative for the lives of women.
I mean, it is getting better. We have more female doctors, so that's helpful. But I have had friends who have been just basically dismissed, as you said, by medical professionals, that it's all in their head. Like endometriosis stands out to me as one, a disease that really gets ignored by a lot of doctors.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, certainly with endometriosis, it's a classic example where women can have, and it's not the only diagnosis like this, but obviously it's a female predominant disorder where you have women who could go years and years and years with all sorts of different complaints that can go underdiagnosed, misdiagnosed. And also this is a disease that we have so far to go in terms of the research into the causes and the treatment of it.
The history of women being treated by doctors, it definitely is a man's world, isn't it? Or it was.
It was a man's world. And, you know, part of the real passion in this book was going back in time to understand and unpack the legacy that we inherit when we show up at the doctor's office today. And that's, for me, understanding the history, which, you know, was built by men. Our healthcare system was not built by women. And that's not to say that the men didn't have good intentions, but there were complicated, complex errors along the way. And we have the chance now to do better by women. And that's not only having more women in our healthcare system, but really taking the time to listen to what women are presenting with and making sure that we're not dismissive of symptoms and that we continue to fund research into female predominant disorders.
You discuss in one chapter the history of hysteria, a hysteria diagnosis.
Yes, yes. Well, you know, the specter of the hysterical woman has played out throughout history, whether it was with Egyptians and the idea, or the Greeks and the idea of the wandering womb as being the cause of all our medical ills, to the 1970s anxious housewife that may have been given too much Valium, or the women today, postmenopausal women who we know are probably being overdiagnosed with depression when they may have other symptoms that could be targeted and addressed through other means. So there's all sorts of different ways throughout history, including to today, that women are told that things are all in their head, that they're crazy for how they feel, and invalidated for the symptoms that they may be having, and at times given the wrong treatment.
When I think, too, about the mistreatment of women by doctors and history, I think of Henrietta Lacks.
Yes, yes, of course. So for our audience right now, Henrietta Lacks had cervical cancer, and her cells were used in many years, are still used to this day to study cervical cancer. And what you're also talking about is the overlap of racism and misogyny in medicine, the idea of informed consent. And we certainly know that minority women in this country have compounded trauma associated with their experience in our healthcare system, and that absolutely needs to change. Across the board, minority women, Black women have worse outcomes from many female predominant disorders because their access to care can also be worse, and their experience with the doctor may also be even compounded further by those other biases.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about in the field of heart health and how women were treated differently than men, and how we still don't understand women's heart health as well as we should have.
They're still treated differently. If you look at heart disease is the #1 killer of women in this country. And yet, certainly when I was in medical school, and it still trickles on through to today, when we think about or we're taught about what are the heart attack symptoms that women present with, they're often referred to as atypical, that our chest pain and our presentation with heart disease is atypical. But we're greater than 50% of the population, So how are our symptoms atypical? They are
Right.
typical of what women experience. And I think that really is an example throughout history, and including to today, about how men in our healthcare system, the male form became the ideal reference body, and then women were the atypical version of that. And in reality, we are not small men. We have unique medical needs.
Exactly. Exactly.
Trust.
Yeah, absolutely. Amy Schumer brought up your book the other day when people were criticizing how her face looked. She looked a little puffy, and so people were criticizing her. And we really, our health should not be up for debate on social media.
No, I think, health, as someone who takes care of breast cancer patients through all walks of life, all socioeconomic status, whether homeless or a famous celebrity or a princess in another country, we share the commonality of our health, and at times our health experience, and celebrities are not immune by any means to the type of vitriol that women can experience, and the type of examination and criticism of our body and our looks. And it's really tragic, and I'm sorry for what she has experienced.
Yeah. You say that the purpose of this book is not to ruin our faith in medicine.
No, it's not to ruin our faith in medicine, nor to malign the men that created it. It's really to say, how do we have a better path forward? How do we partner with an imperfect healthcare system? How do we change the narrative that women have about their bodies, about the healthcare system? And how do we hopefully continue to fund more research about female predominant diseases?
Absolutely. There is so much more that I want to talk to you about. I wish we had an hour with you, but I want to tell our viewers again, the book is titled All in Her Head. Dr. Elizabeth Comen, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
You bet. We'll be right back with more AM Northwest.